Welcome to the Chronically Healthy Life show. When you hear the word chronically, do you automatically associate it with chronic disease? We all do. It's been programmed right into us. But what if we flip that whole idea on its head? Let's discover how we can create chronic health in our bodies, our minds, our relationships, our finances, and of course, in our lives. Let's jump right on in. I'm Andy, and joining me in everything is my life partner, Minna.
So we have a returning guest today, Leandra.
Yes, she is one of our most fun guests. Always cracks me up. And she is so good at what she's doing. And I think it's so relevant right now because so many people are having relationship problems. And it starts with just the right or wrong conversations.
I mean, relationship problems has been going on forever and ever and ever. It's not it's not recent. Just that, I think people used to be a little more simple, a little more straightforward.
Mhm.
Now I guess, a little more, have to think a little bit more about the other person's feelings.
All right, I'll roll with that. What do you have in your mind there?
No, I guess kind of quoting Samantha from before, I think when you're hungry, angry, tired, or sad, you don't want to say things out that you might hurt your partner.
Mm,
Just make sure that you're in a neutral emotion state before you actually tell this guy that you're no good for you, no good for me, or something like that.
It's funny. I remember you hearing that. Yeah, it's like make sure you're in the right emotional space when you're expressing your feelings, right? And I think that that comes down to relationships and our topic, with Leandra, she's going to talk about the dating scene. But I think when it comes down to difficult conversations or courageous conversations, it's not in just relationships, right? We can have it with our boss, which
With
would
our
be
parents, it's probably the
right,
hardest.
with your parents, right,
Telling
your
your parents that
children.
your parents are wrong, that's pretty the hardest thing.
Correct. And I think, like you said, it is sometimes important to express your feelings because otherwise, all those things that they are saying to you and telling you that you're useless, you're never going to get ahead, all these things is going to be embedded into your head, and that becomes your new beliefs. And it's interesting. I was just talking to my life coach, and it's like our subconscious isn't actually our beliefs, it's beliefs that's given to us. So having the conversation to be heard with what you believe in, I think is very important. A little bit too deep.
Yeah. I guess when it comes to conversation, it's actually with every conversation, right? You don't want to, do name calling and start swearing and all that. You just want to be neutral and be supportive and productive, and just say something that's more beneficial to the person, right? Don't just call them useless. Don't tell them what you could do about it to be less useless.
So you're basically calling out my whole family.
Did I? See, not difficult, right?
Well, like I said, that was built into my subconscious. That's the way, I thought we are supposed to talk. And like I always joke, and she still doesn't get the joke yet. When I speak loud, doesn't mean I doesn't mean I don't love her. It's my village way. It's the village way.
That's not the village way.
So, anyways, we'll let the specialist, talk about courageous conversations. She'll be right back with Christy after the short break.
Welcome back to Chronically Healthy Life. In our segment today, I'm going to show you how to make some sugar scrub cubes. Now, you might be familiar with sugar scrub, which is something that you scrub on your skin and make it a little more smooth to remove this dead skin on your skin. And the oil in the sugar scrub will help you build more emollients into your skin. So I'm going to show you a variety of that. We're going to use a little less oil, but we're going to actually incorporate soap into it so that it's a little more soapy. It's going to be solid and it's going to be a little bit easier to use. So what you're going to start out with is these are called melt and pour soap. You can find them on any store, Amazon, anywhere. So what I have here is about 1 cup plus 1 tablespoon of the melt and pour goat milk soap base. So that's the first thing that I'm going to use. And then what I have here is about half a teaspoon of purple clay. So the purple clay would help with the scrubbing effect. You can also use activated charcoal, or you can use a little bit of salt if you want. And I have here's about half cup plus 1 tablespoon of sweet almond oil. This would be the carrier oil that we use for this product, for this sugar scrub. And then, of course, sugar scrub. I have 1 cup of cane sugar, or organic cane sugar. And the last thing we need is just some essential oil. And you can choose whichever flavor or scent you like. So first thing first, we're going to have to melt this. This is called melt and pour. So put it on a double boiler. I'm going to set it to high. And while we're doing that, I'm going to pour the purple clay. And you can find that on Amazon too. And just whisk it into the carrier oil, into the sweet almond oil. And we're going to wait for the soap to completely melt, which is going to take a few minutes. So we're going to come back and take a look at it when we're done. Okay, now, so the soap's melted. And let me see if I can show you. So melted soap should be liquid. It's kind of thin. So let me turn down the heat to like a low medium heat. And now we're going to whisk the almond oil and the clay into it. Make sure you stir it well. And then we're going to add some essential oils. Let's do about 30 drops. Okay, that should do it. Okay, mix it up. So now what you want to do is, and be careful, it's going to be hot. Take it out from heat. And we're going to stir in the sugar. So keep stirring, blend in the sugar. And you can see this mixture actually kind of thickens really fast. So mix it up quickly. And you need to do this quickly because the soap's going to solidifies kind of fast. So grab your molds and just pour it into the sugar molds, the ice cube molds. And if you have problems, like I am, put it back on the heat because it's going to be really thick. So spoon the mixture into the ice cube molds, like I do. And once you do that, we're going to put the ice cube molds into the fridge and let it sit for a couple hours. And then when we come back, I'm going to show you what it looks like after it's done. Okay, so I stuck these sugar scrub cubes, into the fridge for about an hour, and they do set. This batch is not particularly pretty. You can probably do better than me. Just make sure that when you pour the thing into the cubes, make sure that it's still kind of liquid, so keep it hot. Otherwise, it's 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 very uneven. But it's functional. And all you have to do is just grab one of these, when using it, rub it onto your skin. You can use one of these things if you want, just, rub it on your skin with a little more pressure. But otherwise, you're good to go. And that's the biohack for the week. We'll see you again next week.
Imagine a life where every day is fueled by energy, vitality, and purpose. Where age is just a number and your best years are always ahead. Hi, I'm Andy Nam, certified functional nutrition longevity coach, best-selling author, and international speaker. After reversing my own chronic health struggles, I'm now on a mission to help you live longer, stronger, and of course to look younger. I combine biohacking, cutting-edge nutrition, and stem cell technology to unlock your body's full potential. So no matter where your starting point is, I'm going to guide you toward a chronically healthy life. Ready to reverse aging and take control of your future? Connect with me today. Your journey to longevity starts here.
Have you ever felt stuck in your marriage, wondering if things will ever get better? Meet Samantha Kawa, the marriage coach who's helping people transform their relationships in ways they never thought possible. Having saved her own marriage twice, Samantha knows the way forward. If you're ready to rebuild trust, reconnect, and create the love you deserve, visit www.thegems.com today, because the first step to transforming your marriage starts with you.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Chronically Healthy Life Show. I'm Christy Boyd Johnson, and I am delighted to be here today again with a returning guest, Leandra Frey. She is a certified life coach specializing in helping women recover from heartbreak after a divorce. Her mission is to shorten the time it takes to heal and recover a sense of self after the trauma of divorce. She helps women navigate the world of dating with, with an authentic approach of learning to have fun and gain confidence while reigniting their love lives with courage to attract the right mate. Having been divorced herself, she knows the power of shifting your mindset from resentment to feeling love again. Welcome back, Leandra.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
We're delighted. And this just seems like the perfect, we're still in February, Valentine's month, and we've been talking a lot about relationships, and it seems perfect to talk about having difficult conversations.
Yeah.
So I would think that one difficult conversation would be leaving a marriage.
Yes. That is really hard. And it's usually either two things having to happen in a marriage. I mean, there's so many things, but a lot of times we're not having the difficult conversations that lead to a demise of a marriage, right? So if people have been procrastinating important conversations, not communicating, right? We hear not communications. If we've been going into conversations with a blame mentality and we're not owning ourselves, or the other person is not owning their contribution, that all lends itself to the end of a marriage. But then we have that piece of not having important conversations. And then the other piece is we're at the end, right? And usually, you and I have gone through divorces. It's not just one and done, right? We've gone where if we are choosing to have those moments, then there's a series of unbreakable conversations, right? We're in an unbreaking phase. Hopefully, most of the times it's out of anger, frustration. A lot of times it's too late. You didn't do the thing, or you didn't listen to me. So then we do have those intentional conversations. And then if you have kids, oh my goodness, you guys better be having them. Then it's a series of difficult conversations for a very long time. But if you get into the habit of them, right? I think if you get in the habit, especially if you do have kids on the other side coming out of a divorce, stop, what I say, stop procrastinating, then those are less difficult. They become habitual, yes, but then they become intentional conversations, and conversations that can change the dynamic of co-parenting, or if we're dealing with an unruly, whoever, if we're dealing with an unruly spouse or in-laws, right? A lot of times when I'm talking to people and I hear a lot of resentment, I ask, did you talk to them? Did you do the thing? Right. And so yeah, a lot of people want to avoid, but also, yeah.
Well, so an example of a difficult conversation then could be like, our oldest child is 15, say, I'm just making something up here, and they're getting into a lot of trouble at school.
Yeah.
And we're co-parenting this child, and we need to be on the same page with this.
Right.
So in a perfect world, you're on the same page, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What happens when you're not on the same page?
Oh man, that is hard. And I think that happens. And if you're the one bringing it up, right, we have to always start with what is it that the result that we want, right? In this case, we want our 15-year-old to succeed. They're getting in trouble. So when we start the conversation, we say, hey, I need your undivided attention for 15 minutes or whatever it is. And then I think Minna and Andy talked about it at the very beginning of this
segment
where are you rested? Are you rushed? Have you eaten? Are you upset about something else? We need to set that time. And so we see that a lot, if you're in business, can I talk to you for a second? Right. I need your undivided attention. And so we don't want to throw it at them and say, hey, we got to talk, and you're rushing and you're trying to get to the thing. No, we need to have had enough rest, have eaten, in a right mind space, because we want that person's undivided attention. Your ex-spouse's undivided attention, right? And then we want to say, hey, even though y'all aren't together anymore, you are still co-parenting, and we're still co-parenting. We have a problem, and you want to talk about the reality of the problem, right? He's not doing well in school. He's gotten trouble. I say it could be a girl, but in my mind, I'm like 15-year-old guy, right? So yeah. And then we want to talk about, right, here's where we want to go, and then not go in with any blame, right? We don't want to say this is because you're working too much, you're with your girl, you're not paying attention, right? A lot of times we'll go in with blame, especially if it's a difficult conversation. And we have to look at it hey, there's a problem, look at our reality, and then go in with, okay, here's what the problem, here's what I think can happen, what we can do together. And remember, this is a great space, 15 minutes or whatever it takes. Now, we're not rushed. Got to put that all in mind. And then ask, what do you think are great solutions? And then go from there, right? And then practice listening. That's the hard part, listening. And then if you feel the conversation going sideways, because there might be blame, got to catch yourself on that one. Right. Even if you hear ex-spouse saying, well, you, or something like that, that's when we have to go, okay, let's go back to why we're here. Our son is struggling, our daughter is struggling. What we do together? And then because you'll probably have to steer the conversation a couple of times, bring it back, and then literally work together, but always bring it back to the revision, right? Of the result. I say vision, but the result, you'll hear me say that all the time, but what the end result is,
right?
And breathe through it. And sometimes it's you have to ask them, or ask yourself, but ask them just hey, does this make sense? Is this something doable? Right? Especially if it's you need to get off at 5 p.m. There could be, because then there's going to be a series of commitments that they're going to be happy, right? If everyone's on the same page, hopefully. This is an ideal situation. And then the goal is, you had said, well, what if they're not reasonable, right? If they're not reasonable, we're going to try again, right? That's the thing. Maybe not in that moment. What happens with women, sometimes men, but I feel like we tend to shut down and say, well, I'll just take care of it myself. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So and that's where I come in a lot and say, no, that's part of why the divorce probably happened in the first place, or why, like I'm recently working with someone who got divorced, and she realized that she was doing everything, and then she's divorced, and I'm like, now what are you doing?
Uh-huh.
Everything. And so anyway, we had to go, and this one was a boundary issue that she was having, but also an intentional conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, we cannot go in, if it didn't work the first time, let's try to do it all on our own. You need to go again and practice, because the first time you go in, it's not going to be pretty. Oh my gosh, it's not going to be pretty, but you got to go again, because, we're human beings and we're trying to figure this out. And sometimes it might be new for you, especially your ex-spouse. You're like, whoa, you didn't do this before. You ever have that where spouses actually become better friends after?
Yes, I've seen that.
Yeah. And then it's like, you guys had the tools before, they just probably didn't know how to do it. And then they're like, this is so reasonable.
Yeah.
But especially if they're trying to work with their kids, usually a lot of that happens when there's kids involved or grandkids, or they're trying to come to a common goal. But yeah, because they started talking and problem solving, which is what, relationships are, right? We problem solve whatever problem we have currently, our aging parents, our house, a car wreck, our kids, like whatever it is. That's what we're trying to do.
Right.
Just try to do it together.
Right. I'd like to just say, this comes out of my experience. There are certain situations where this isn't even possible, like in abuse situations, or when you're dealing with someone who is an extreme narcissist or a psychopathic, like in my case, which it's like I've cut them out of my life completely, 100%. That's the only way. And I'm protecting the children as part of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but otherwise, when we're talking about rational human beings.
Yeah. If you're dealing, with something like that, or you're dealing with an alcoholic, right? A lot of people get divorced because they were with an alcoholic, or someone that was physically abusive.
Right.
If they're still an alcoholic, you're not going to get much traction there. So I understand that, right? Yeah. There's certain caveats, and then, some people get out of the relationship and are like, they get out of it and they still have an alcoholic ex-husband. That doesn't stop, right? Unless, and then they just have to realize that's our reality, and know that, just because you change the circumstances doesn't mean you've changed them.
Right.
That's a real deal.
Yeah. So difficult conversations may not even be possible with someone like that. But when you may have had differences in your marriages, but you're both good human beings.
Yeah.
Then it's much more reasonable to try to go, if you stay focused, like you said, that really makes sense to me. We're not talking about what happened in our marriage. We're not talking about what you did to piss me off and what I did to piss you off. We're talking about how we can come to a solution for this particular 15-minute thing that we have. And that makes total sense to me. That's very logical.
Yeah. And we have to stay there. I mean, we have to go with the intent, right? The intent, and knowing what our impact is going to be, right? So we have to, when we're getting ready to have a conversation, even though we had to do all those physicalities, make sure that we're, rested, fed, all those things, then we still have to go, this is the result I want. But then we have to tell ourselves, like, intentional, like, how do I want to be in this conversation with someone that I don't quite trust, because now we're at a divorce, but especially when someone's, we have, oh gosh, there's so many, obviously from my end, it's always ex-husbands. So, so I have to be like
an ex-spouse,
right? So ex-spouse. So I always, like, especially if there's still negative bias toward them, I always have them look at, like, who they were, right? Like, a person wasn't always terrible. That's your memory, right? And I was like, we have to look at the person all together and remember that, hey, you fell in love with this piece of the person. They're still there. That person's still there. So they still have the capacity of being a good dad, right? If you need to solve this 15-year-old's problem. And then remember that. And that's what you're calling on, right? Like, so when we're going in, we're not going to go in thinking, oh my God, there he goes again, being who he is, right? We still have to work on our thought process and be like, hey, I want to be curious. I want to be, I want to be compassionate. I want to be empathetic. I want to be a problem solver, right? Together, and understand that. And just remember, like, hey, we're looking at the whole spouse, ex-spouse, or whoever. We're looking at the whole person.
Right.
And taking away from that negative bias. If we don't go in with that, I'll forget it. Then we're going to go sideways. Right. So yeah, I mean, that takes that takes some thinking, right? And that's part of like when I'm coaching someone, we play out the conversation. I'm like, okay, what is this going to look like? What do you think you're going to do? He's going to say this. What are you going to say? We will go back and forth on it. And I can hear the frustration when they're like, oh, come on, do I have to say that? I'm like, you don't have to say it, but what's your goal here?
Right.
So,
and I think there's a deeper element there. Like when two normal, rational human beings can set aside their personal, whatever happened in their marriage differences for the sake of the children, that creates a security for the children that, okay, I live with mom half the week and dad, 1 week with mom, 1 week with dad, whatever kind of custody that might be.
Yeah.
But they're both still functioning as a parental unit, which is not something kid would think.
Yeah.
But they would experience that feeling of my parents are still here for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that even if they're not living all together in the same house, there's security in that. And kids need that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and there's so many things to that where it's like, you're going over your dad's house, and the practice of not speaking negatively about the spouse, right? Unless the kids are not dumb, right? They saw whatever was happening, right? They're not dumb, but they also know what you said, they can still have safety in it. And so, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that happen when, gosh, man, it gets all. But I know I'm thinking, I'm like, oh my God, there's so many things, because sometimes it's like if someone got sick, right?
Yeah.
When, like someone's sick, grandma's sick. On the other side, right? Like we still, hey, that's a problem. How do you want to be? Like these are your kids, grandkids, right. And if there's, or someone got cancer, usually the spouses are still involved, right? So we still want, those are all conversations, and people want to block each other out. And I'm like, no, that's not the thing. Right?
Yeah.
And I'm saying this is an opportunity for either the kids to see you guys still work together, right? Because you're still tied by the kids for marriages, grandkids, especially you still got little ones at home. And I'd say not little ones, but a lot of times the divorces are happening when there's already a teenager. Usually that's when we see it, or at the very beginning, like 3 or 4 is usually when we see it. So there's a lot of history. So that's why these conversations are so important, because you're not going to stop having them, right?
Yes.
I'm like, you can get yes, know that in divorce, if there's kids, you're still going to you're going to be talking. Unless you had that protocol where it's like, unless they're crazy.
Excluding crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. This is, you know what? This makes so much sense. Just set the emotion aside, go talk to your girlfriends about it, or someone like you, and then, talk rationally for 15 minutes at a time. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay, we are going to take a short break, and everybody, when we come back, we're going to talk about dating after divorce. So stay tuned.
Thanks.
An empowered life has no expiration date. We're all created to do incredible things, like conquer summits, catch big waves, and live our passions. As time goes on, our bodies begin to show signs that things just aren't as they used to be. Our energy levels decline, sleep patterns shift, and recovery slows. But our bodies are masterpieces of design, holding the potential to bounce back better than ever. With X39, we achieved something remarkable in the field of wellness and regenerative science that others could not. By utilizing LifeWave's unique patented technology, X39 uses light to elevate GHKCU, a copper peptide known to support overall health and wellness. Unlike traditional light therapy, which requires external light sources, X39 uses the body's own infrared light to naturally increase vitality, enhancing the body's flow of natural energy. For improvements in strength, stamina, performance, and overall health and well-being, with the simplicity of an affordable, non-invasive, non-transdermal patch. As we age, levels of these life-enhancing elements, which are associated with wellness and longevity, begin to decline. LifeWave invested 10 years into stem cell research, which resulted in over 70 patents. X39 was born to bring to the public a product that can support wellness in an entirely new way, supporting the production of younger, healthier cells with wearable light technology. Becoming a powerhouse is easier than you think. Harness your body's natural potential to maintain youthful energy and vitality, because life comes at you fast, but it doesn't have to pass you by. Live long, live well, live young. Be the light with LifeWave X39. LifeWave.
What we believe to be true will be true for us, even if it's based on completely incorrect information. And we create our circumstances to support the belief systems that we carry. That might sound like bad news, like you're somehow at fault or to blame for the things about your life that aren't working. But let me share with you why that's not true. I'm Jackie Mott. I've always been fascinated by what makes people tick, and I've been working with people for well over a decade. What I can tell you is that those two statements have proven themselves to be true over and over again. The really great news is that we can change it. If you created your circumstances, you must also have the ability to create something different. You can overcome negative conditioning, self-image, limiting beliefs, and instead create healthy relationships, joy, and fulfillment, and that is my specialty. You can find me at jackiemott.com or on Facebook or YouTube. And if you're ready to start living with confidence, joy, healthy relationships, and excitement about your life and future, send me a message or an email and let's talk about it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Chronically Healthy Life show. We are here with Leandra Frey, a life and dating coach, and we've been talking about having difficult conversations. So I'd like to move into the world of dating post-divorce because not only we can kind of imagine the kind of conversations you might have with an ex-spouse or your children about that. But what about when you're starting a new relationship or just dating fresh before you get into a relationship?
Yeah.
That's pretty terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Well, there is learning to have courage and confidence, right? Which I help in. But part of when you start to date, right? We want to look at, again, the intention. Why are you dating? So a lot of times when I ask women, I'm like, okay, why are you here? What is it that you're looking for? Right? Are we dating because we want something serious? You're bored. You're just trying to not date your ex-husband or ex-spouse. Like, what are your intentions? Because I need to know like where their mind is at, right? If they're like in an anger state, which I just did a call yesterday, like a webinar yesterday where we learned about burn the haystack. And it's like where you go through a series of men or women and just like go right after another to see if they're even worth talking to. And I'm like, what a terrible mindset. Like, I agree that yes, you want to like meet as many people as possible, but not in the effort to not get to know them. Right. Like, because, you know, on first dates, everyone's not quite themselves just because they're nervous. But I was like, that doesn't sound like a very healthy way to go about dating. It's mostly on the younger end, but I still wouldn't recommend that. So it's more like, okay, we're going to date. You're looking for someone long-term. And sometimes a woman will say, well, I just want someone that, you know, especially after if they come through a traumatic divorce, they're like, I just want someone nice to have dinner with, you know, and that sounds reasonable. But then we're still kind of like not looking deep. Right. And I was like, hey, let's look at the values. Like, if you're going to spend dinner with someone every day for the rest of your life, we don't want to just to be like, oh, this was a nice dinner and just keep it even keel. Right. Let's really look, because really dating, and if you're going to marriage, I mean, we're looking at people's life partners. Right. So then I have them look at like, hey, what are your intentions? What are you looking for? Right. Values. What are you not willing to deal with? That's probably one of the biggest conversations. I was like, what are your non-negotiables? Right. Most people think like their red flags are like, oh, smoking, alcoholism, or something. Right. Those are easy stuff. And I'm like, no one's going to show that on a first date. Well, actually, that's not true. I have one client that has dated people that got drunk on the first date. And so I'm like, that's not your person. So this happened. So that's an easy, like, that's not your person. But, but the thing about it is that, the non-negotiables, we got to be willing to say, especially like if you're like, you know, you already raised your kids, right? If some people like, I have college age kids, and I'm like, well, do you want to date someone that has a 6-year-old? And so that's an intentional conversation. I'm like, okay. Or sometimes it's with yourself. I'm like, okay, tell me more about that. And they're like, well, I've already done that. I don't want to deal with that. I'm like, okay. So if you find out that person that you're sitting across the coffee with, you find out that there's a 6-year-old, you're going to say, no, thank you. That's your probably first intentional conversation, or a difficult conversation where you're like, man, I know we align on so many things, but this is a deal breaker for me. Right. And sometimes if we don't know that ahead of time, like that is one of your deal breakers, usually we have a couple that are in there, but most people don't know what it is until they start talking to someone and they start really liking them. And then like, you know, 2 or 3 months later, they're like, oh, I forgot about this thing. Like, you know, they got distracted by the shiny, you know, funness and stuff. And then reality hits. That's a reality hit, right? We got to look at a reality. Like, you don't want to date someone that has a 6-year-old, or, you know, or that is traveling all the time. You know, I've had a couple of people that are like, some people travel full time for work, right? They're still traveling. And, you know, when they first think about it, they're like, well, I mean, he's gone 2 weeks. I think I'm okay with that. And I'm like, but don't you, like, is that a regular thing on his job? And they're like, yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like it's going to be stopping anytime soon. I was like, well, what is it that you're looking for? I want someone to be with, not every night of the week, but, you know, 3 or 4 nights of the week, especially when you're dating. That's availability, right? Are they even available for you? Stage of life, their type of job. And those are things that we need to be honest about. Now, if you're someone who's traveling the world because, you know, you're Doctor Without Borders, or you're part of a nonprofit, then you're like, all right, cool. I'll see you in 2 weeks. We'll coordinate it. Maybe I'll see you on the other side of the world. Now, there was people who do that, but those are conversations. So those are like initial conversations that are tiny, but super important to notice. Right. One of the most difficult conversations that I had, not most difficult, but I think this was on a 3rd date, because I always encourage people to go to the 2nd and 3rd dates, because on a first date, you don't really know someone. And there are definitely like so many nerves. And you don't really know someone the first date or so, right? It takes a little time. So I was on this great date with this guy. We had gone on a couple, I think we were on our 3rd date. We were having the best time. I mean, I don't know if I told the story before, but I can't remember if I told it before, but he said, I'm Christian. And I think he was like Orthodox Greek or something, like Orthodox Catholic. And I remember I was like, oh, okay. Like, not a problem. Like, I didn't think anything about it. But then he's like, no, you would have to convert to, like, if we were to get married, we would have to convert. And I was like, oh, yeah. Nah. I mean, I knew right ahead. I was like, I'm not going to do that. Like, I already knew I wasn't going to do that. But man, this guy was so great.
Yeah.
He had great chemistry, like so many great things about us. But I knew that was one of my non-negotiables. Like, I'm not converting to Catholicism, right? Not a bad thing, but for me, it was something else.
It wasn't right for you.
Yeah. And I had to say, oh my gosh, like, what a great time. That was, I know we had a vision, we're getting to know each other, but this is, no, and there was no blame there. Like that was just, so those are like many things that were happening. And then this is probably one of my favorite stories, my favorite terrible stories, but I have to tell this to you guys because a lot of times when we're dating someone, we don't get curious, right? It's, there's a book called Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott. I highly recommend it. But one of the quotes is, or one of the things she says is, what are you pretending not to know? Right. And those are unsaid conversations, right? Unsaid questions, because we just want to stay in our like little blinders and like, no, things are great. Things are great.
Yeah. Big mistake.
Yeah. And there was this trip that I was on a singles. I mean, it was a lake trip that we went to like every week, every summer. I would go with my girlfriends, their boyfriends. There were some marrieds, and I would go, and there was, I was single at the time. So there was always cute guys, and there was like one I would flirt with, but nothing ever happened. It was just like, fun and nothing crazy. But anyway, the next year, I brought my boyfriend at the time. At the time I was, this was after my divorce. So this is like in between my marriages. And so we went, and the guy that I flirted with the year before was there. I was talking to him. He was talking to my boyfriend. No problem. Anyway, later in the evening, I'm sitting reading a book, and my boyfriend at the time is sitting next to me, and we're camping, or we're like in a lake house, and there's this giant spider that gets on me, right? It was like this giant spider. I was like, oh my God, there's a spider, blah, 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 right? I threw it off. And he was like, cool as a cucumber, just really stoic, and just like no care or empathy for that moment in time, right? And I remember thinking, wow, that was kind of interesting. Like he was just kind of cold. Like it felt kind of like a cold expression. And I remember like wanting to get mad at his reaction or non-reaction. And then I thought, oh, there's something going on. Like I remember I was like, there's something going on here. And I said, hey, getting curious. I was like, what's going on? He just had a spider. I don't, know, like what's happening, right? Like asking the question I didn't want to ask, but I knew it was important. And he said, you're flirting with that guy. Like, he goes, you've been doing that all weekend. And I was like, what? And I had to ask myself, like, am I flirting with the guy? If the one from the year before, right? I was like, oh my gosh. So then I had to ask myself, I had to look at it from his lens, right? Be in the other person's shoes. What is my impact, right? One of the things we got to look at when we're having intentional conversations, because I wanted to defend myself, right? I had to look at it and go, oh my gosh, from his lens, I can see that. I can totally see that. And I felt so terrible at that moment because he was saying something, he was being honest, by the way. I had to get curious. Hey, what's going on here? It was about a spider, but it was bigger than that.
Yeah.
And then I found out that like, I wasn't being the great girlfriend that I was, like that I could have been, right? And some people would have been like, that's a jerky thing to do. But I was like, no, there was a lot of unsaid things that were happening. And if he hadn't said anything, I would have kept on doing the thing, right? Which was, I don't even remember exactly what I was flirting, but I knew what he was talking about. Because you have to ask yourself, if this is true, this is another thing about people, part of difficult conversations. If someone accuses you of something and they give you a feedback, right? If they're like, you're, in this case, jealousy, right? The question I had to ask myself was, this guy or a person is asking me something very important. I have to ask myself, how much is that 1% true? right? Because sometimes we're like, they're just saying stuff or whatever. Well, I mean, what do they know? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, own it. Just own it for a second. 1% true, 10% true. Really look at it. Now, if you have the really ability to put yourself in those shoes, and I had just been learning a lot, so I was like, okay, I can see that. But if you're not used to that, still ask yourself, like, okay, how could this be 1 or 10% true? And then answer the question, right? Because then that takes you out of defense mode, right? Because a lot of times we'll go into blame, and you're this, and you're a jerk, and you're blah, blah, blah. And then before we know, we're in a big fight and we're not talking to each other. Sorry.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
but that's an example of a difficult conversation. So we were able to course correct in that moment to enjoy the rest of, like, I apologized. I was like, oh my gosh, I changed my behavior. And then, we had a great rest of, I don't know, it wasn't like that long of a trip after that, but at least we were able to no one was pissed off after that. Right. So anyway, those are examples. And then the big one you're probably looking for, that this happens. I have a couple of clients that are going through this, is that they're dating, right? They got the courage to date, and they're like, dating. And then they're like, well, I like 2 guys. Like they're dating like 2 or 3 guys. I'm like, great. That's what you're supposed to be doing until you know, right? Until you know. And then they're like, wait, I have to let one go? And I'm like, well, eventually.
At some point, yeah.
Eventually, you're going to have to go do the thing. And they're like, but I was like, no, let's go talk to, I was like, and here's what sometimes happens. They don't want to have that conversation. They want to keep playing. And I was like, that's okay. But at some point, either the guy is going to come to you and say, I'm now ready to go exclusive. And you have to be ready for that. Like, then, or if you're not ready to go into an exclusive relationship, not a problem. But then we need to be honest and say, I'm still looking, still talking to other guys. Can I get another month? Right. Or I think I need more time to get to know you, or I need time to explore, because I just came out of, a 30-year relationship, because we have widows in here that I help too. So they're still exploring, after being not with someone for 30 years. And so then eventually it's like, okay, let's be prepared for that. And what are you going to say? And what are you going to ask? Because sometimes people aren't ready. And sometimes I'm like, and sometimes it'll be you. Well, they'll say, I'm not ready to be with you quite yet. It doesn't have to be the end of the relationship. Right. And that's where people get upset on the dating. They're like, well, I'm ready to go exclusive. And I'm like, no, not on the dating, like until they're fully ready. Now, if someone's like, okay, well, I know what I want. Usually the guys like to like push things faster than we do. I'll just throw the guys under the bus on that. Sorry, but I was like, but men know what they want too, right? They're pretty clear. So that I help with that too. So that is part of the process. And And so say that you've done all that and there is someone and the 2 of you are talking, then what kind of difficult conversations? Because you don't want to get that ring on your finger until. And you just have to say, I'm not ready. Right. And that may be the permission. That may be, it'll either, someone will be patient. Someone will be like, I'm willing to wait for you. Right. We hear love stories where people waited. Right. But then we still have the other story where it's like, you weren't serious. We see it more when people were in their 20s, but it actually still happens. It doesn't matter how old you are, 60s and 70s, like people are still trying to figure things out. So, especially if they're coming off long-term relationships. It's just also being prepared to say goodbye. Right. If that other person is not ready, like, and it does happen. It's like, I'm not ready to be being honest about it. Right. That's the part, like, hey, and you hear this has nothing to do with you. It really has nothing to do with them. Sometimes it's just like, because you have all the right values, you have the right compatibility. But if that person is not quite ready, like, maybe it'll be like in 6 months, or maybe not. And the person will say goodbye. And that is part of the dating process. But you have to be prepared for it on either side.
Right.
So that's why I tell women, please be dating multiple people, because either you won't be ready, or they will say you're not the one, right? You're not the, and then they'll leave, and then you don't want to be like, oh my gosh, I'm by myself and I have to start over again. You're never starting over again. Like, that's what I tell people. Like, you're not starting over again. We're just trying to find the right person that's your right, I would say, flavor, because we're not, we're not everyone's jam, right? Until you're looking for that click.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. I dated someone after who and I divorced him in my 30s, but I at this point was in my early 40s. And he had 2 kids from a previous marriage, and he wanted more kids. And that for me was just a non-negotiable. I'm like, not having children in my 40s.
Yeah.
Not interested.
Yeah.
And so that was a rough one.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's part of an honest conversation, right?
Right. Right.
I love you. And, I had to do the same thing when I was getting married again. Because I was older than my husband now. I was like, hey, just so you know, I'm not, and I told him, I was like, I'm not willing to do, we were dating. I was like, I'm older than you. I don't know if I'm going to have kids. And at this point in my life, I'm not ready to do IVF. And, because that's where we were headed. If we got married, well, we were already thinking marriage, but that was a difficult conversation. And I was in tears. I remember I was in tears, and because I was like, because it's hard, right? It was a courageous moment. I was like, oh my gosh, I love you, but I'm willing to let you go so that you could go create children with someone else.
Right.
And, and some of us will stay in a relationship. Oh man, Mel Robbins talks about this in her Let Them book, where they stay hoping that they'll change their mind.
Right.
And then that
just creates all this resentment.
Oh my gosh.
I gave up this for you, or you gave up, or I did this for you and I didn't really want it, or whatever. And and if someone says, that's good that you're very clear about the I'm not having 10 in your 40s, but it happens at 28 or 30, and someone will say, yeah, I think I want kids, or I'm not sure. And those are important conversations. Or the 6-year-old thing, where it's like, I don't want to date someone that has an elementary kid, but you start dating thinking you'll change your mind. Right.
And then you're like, oh no, I remember this sucked. And then you're already attached to the 6-year-old. And then you realize this is not what I wanted. And then people get hurt. And that's why
people get hurt.
And that's why we need to have these conversations.
It's very important. This has been a great conversation that we're having here. And unfortunately, we're running out of time.
I know.
Leandra, let's share with our audience how they can find you.
Yeah, on the barcode that you're seeing it goes straight to my Calendly link, so you can schedule a Zoom call with me, and I will help you wherever you are in your dating world. If you're ready to date, or you're not sure, and you're like, where do I start? I can go and help you. And then you can also follow me on Facebook, Frey Coaching, or Instagram, and then there's my email. And all the places also show my events. I do events also online and in person. So definitely follow me. I would love to interact with you, and definitely have a phone call with me.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming back and joining us again. And hopefully conversations will get a little easier now.
Takes practice.
So, okay, everybody stay tuned. We'll be right back after this message. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Kids Corner. All right, for our last Friday in February, we're going to talk about play with your kids for the pure, unadulterated joy of it. Sometimes we need to do things with our kids. In fact, a lot of times we need to do things with our kids that are just for fun, just for the enjoyment of life. Whatever that looks like for you, if it's travel, if it's just exploring the neighborhoods you live in, maybe there's some really cool, I used to live in San Diego. There's some really cool places to go there, like the Balboa Park. There's a science center and a theater and museums and all kinds of things that are fun to explore. A lot of experiential stuff for kids to do. Playing for joy could mean having a party that's just because, not because of a birthday or a celebration, but just, hey, let's have a party and invite all our friends and just play. And or it could be music, it could be dancing, it could be art, it could be anything. And the beauty of playing just for joy is, what are you teaching your kids? You're teaching them it's okay to be happy. It's okay to have fun. It's okay to live the life that they have been given and not just be burdened by work and all this torturous stuff that the society has put on us that we are now saying no to. We're saying no to that. We're saying yes to life. So play with your kids. And you know what? The benefit to we adults when we play with kids, it's just a happy time, and it just lightens your spirit. It lightens your heart. It takes so much burden off, and it feels so good to just be present and play. So joyful play. Be sure that sometimes play is just for the joy of it. Okay, everyone, ciao for now.
I'm so glad that we had Leandra Frey back here today. I mean, if we have to do the whole dating game again, I wouldn't know what to do.
Oh my
with it.
gosh. And we were so entranced listening to their conversation. The time flew by, right? Like literally we're out of time on the show. So thank you so much for sharing everything, Leandra. And for anyone that's having dating problems, make sure they reach out to her. So next week we have a new friend I just met. He's a life coach also. Very interesting story. His name is Romeo Ochier. So we're going to have him next week. And so join us here every Friday at 7 p.m. CST. You can watch past episodes at e360tv.com on the Vitality TV network or on youtube.com/Chronically Healthy Life. And if you want to know more about what we do or want to schedule a call, go to chronicallyhealthylife.com.
We'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week.